Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer is from the Chicago Tribune, covers the Bears. It is the final OTA this week. Next week is the mandatory mini camp. A lot has been accomplished on the field. A lot of chemistry has been developed, especially and notably, Dan, between Justin Fields and DJ Moore, the new wide receiver, the starting quarterback ready to take a step on the No Excuses Tour. We've talked about that. But that seems to be what everybody is talking about coming out of OTAs. Jalen Johnson is back on the field, but people seem to be fixated and focused on the offense and the connection between quarterback and receiver.
Well, because you have a guy now that is a no doubt number one receiver for your budding franchise quarterback to lean on. And that's a true value to a quarterback to have that trust, to have it be developing as quickly as it is notable. Jaquan Brisker had maybe the most notable testimonial this week in saying they look like they're best friends, which is pretty notable considering that they met, less than 3 months ago at this point when they went up to a Bulls game and got a chance to meet for the first time, essentially. And so it's notable. I mean, you can see it. Obviously, we're talking about sessions here practice-wise where Darnell Mooney is still not back and acclimated into the offense. Chase Claypool has missed time with some soft tissue stuff. And so Justin looks for who he can rely on. And right now, DJ Moore is number one on who can I rely on. And it looks pretty good. I will tell you this, that probably for me, in watching it with my own eyes and then asking around to the coaches in the building and some of the players, DJ Moore's ability to separate is notable every single practice. And you try to get into that a little more and find out why. I asked Andrew Janocko, what the quarterback's coach of the Bears, what makes DJ so quarterback friendly? And he said there's a combination of obviously the speed is there, but the savvy, the ability to understand what coverage you're getting on a certain play and knowing how to attack it with your leverage, knowing how to attack it with the way you run your route. These are things that create, quarters of a second of openings that make things easier for your quarterback.
Explosiveness.
Yeah, and one of the things that Andrew Janocko said is, as a quarterback, then you can trust that, right? And we use this word trust a lot, but it's not, is he going to be in that window when he's supposed to be there? It's no, he's there, boom, hit it, and then he's got the ball and he's able to make a play with the ball. Tyke Tolbert went a step further with kind of his praise of DJ Moore's ability to absorb everything and said, given the volume of information they've thrown on him, given this offense and how its complexity with motions, shifts, and alignments, that DJ Moore is clearly studying at night because he comes back and he rarely misses a motion, shift, or alignment. And when you've got a guy who's already assignment sound in early June of his first season with the team, you say, okay, this portends very well for where things can head, because now when you can understand that, now you can understand what the play is designed to do, and then you can understand, using what we just talked about previously, your own background and library of information on how to attack coverages. You've got a guy who is very, very sound in everything he does. Quarterback's best friend right there.
I just think that whenever people like coaches talk about DJ Moore, it just reinforces the idea that the experience factor is something the Bears really haven't had at that position, combined with, they've had experienced receivers, but maybe not with the explosiveness, maybe not with the ability to separate and the ability to make the crazy catches that Dave Wannstedt says he hasn't seen the Bears make in years. I think the experience factor is what I look at and think that, based on, again, very early returns, but you look at the roster and you look at how much he is going to mean to this offense, it was very easy to think that DJ Moore could be the best football player on the field for the Bears next year, maybe even including Justin Fields. If Justin Fields struggles with consistency, I think you're going to get more consistency out of DJ Moore maybe than any other offensive player. I think you could get more explosiveness than anybody, with the exception of maybe Justin Fields. And that's what you traded for. And that's why I think that we talk all the time about how, one can make the other better. They're going to complement each other. And
for
DJ
sure.
Moore and Justin Fields, a very dangerous combination. Early returns are good. And cynically, some people will point out, well, you know what? A year ago, I heard exactly the same thing about Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney. And at that point in time, they were saying the same thing.
Sure.
I kind of rolled my eyes, because Darnell Mooney, as good as he was, isn't DJ Moore. And Justin Fields, as good as he can be, hadn't arrived yet either. So I think that's different, even though it sounded the same. What we're talking about now is a guy who has been there, done that, and you can count on will do it again.
That right there is the biggest difference. We were projecting with Mooney. We were seeing an escalator on its way up. With DJ Moore, he has proven it, and he's proven it with a half dozen or more quarterbacks throwing to him. So you're not guessing with any of this. You've seen the production. You know that it's established production, and you know what you're going to get out of him. Ideally, David, to your point, I think DJ Moore. What you want if you're the Chicago Bears is that DJ Moore is so good that Justin Fields is by extension the best player you have on the football field every week, right? And that's how Justin breaks through and takes the leap, because as he works on all the other things that they're pushing him to work on, you've got a guy that can get you a first down on 3rd and 6. You've got a guy that can get you a touchdown when you're inside the red zone. You've got a guy that consistently will be there for you, that will elevate the confidence and command of a quarterback. And now all of a sudden the quarterback hits that springboard that we're waiting for Justin to hit. It's going to be fun to watch, because look, like we've been out now to 3 OTA practices. It's 3 practices. You can't make much of a judgment off of
Right.
that. By late August, we're going to have 18 plus training camp practices. We're going to have a trip to Indianapolis to see what that looks like against an opposing defense. We're going to have a huge sample size to see if this was a mirage or whether it was just the start of something beautiful. And so it's going to be great here. We don't have that long to wait anymore, to get this huge sample size of evidence that tells us how this connection is really coming along.
It's all conversation at this point, speculation and projection, but it does matter when you hear from the offensive coordinator and how Luke Getsy plans to use all of these new weapons and maybe get the most out of the quarterback in year 2 in this offense for Justin Fields. Luke Getsy did go to the podium this week as well and got another opportunity to talk about, the latest in Justin Fields and what he has seen from other guys. What did you hear from Luke Getsy that stood out the most, Dan?
Yeah, there's a couple things here for me, David. The first thing is that Luke always shoots you straight, and so he's not going to make something more than it is ever, and he's not going to let reporters asking leading questions make something more than it is either. And so I kind of specifically just kind of open-ended asked him what his command is personally of the personnel that he has with the vision of where he wants the offense to go. And he was pretty straightforward in saying this is a phase of the offseason where you can't do as much as you want to. Obviously, can't establish a running game when there are no pads on and you're not able to do anything. And so there's a lot of feeling out that goes on during this period for an offensive coordinator who's trying to shape this offense. He's very, very emphatic and adamant that this stage of football in April and May and June is about creating chemistry, about hammering fundamentals, and about teaching. And then we'll get into training camp and we'll see what that all looks like when we hit the ground. His point is like, we've got to make progress in the areas that we just talked about so that when you do get into training camp, you're not taking a step back and reviewing things that should have already been pretty much solidified in April, May, and June. To that end, when we can get into a little bit more of this in a little bit, I think he has very clear-cut expectations of Justin Fields. I think they're echoed by his boss, Matt Eberflus, and then the quarterback's coach, Andrew Janocko, in setting up some pretty good parameters of where they want Justin to go. I cannot tell you how many times the words timing and rhythm have been said by people at that dais in the last 5-6 weeks at Halas Hall. It's a lot. It's coming up every single session, and it's obviously a talking point that they're hammering every single day so that this developing quarterback really understands the importance of where he needs to go with that part of the passing game.
So that's related to his relationship and dynamic and chemistry with receivers and DJ Moore and the new core and maybe the tight ends with Cole Kmet and Tunyon and maybe even the backfield. I wonder how the offensive line factors into that too, the timing, the rhythm, the familiarity, because I asked that because we spent an entire podcast earlier on a previous episode about Jalen Johnson's return. Nate Davis also back at right guard. Nate Davis, gets a $30 million free agent contract and then you couldn't find him. So now he's back and he's in an offensive line that feels like there's not going to be a ton of competition, Dan. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Maybe they'll say otherwise, but you've got Cody Whitehair at center kind of to begin that chemistry and that dynamic and that continuity that you're talking about. And you got the same guards with Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis. And then your tackles are your homegrown products, Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright. So what value did Getsy attach to having those guys in place? And how much do you think that is certainly going to be your unquestioned 5 offensive linemen?
Oh, that's going to be, barring an injury, that's going to be your offensive line for certain. Ja'Tyre Carter has been taking the reps in Nate Davis's absence at guard. He's a day 3 pick last year. out of Southern, a guy that they're trying to groom and develop into to somebody that can be a guy that can hold down a roster spot and be an asset to you some way, somehow. Nate Davis's absence to me, David, is one of the bigger head scratchers because they talk all the time about creating that gel among an offensive line as quickly as possible. When you have one of your marquee signings decide that he doesn't need to gel as quick as everybody else, well, now you got to play catch up a little bit. He's back this week. He practiced earlier in the week with the 3 sessions that they had. And, now it's about just trying to make up for lost time as much as you can to get that cohesion feeling like it's supposed to feel when you get to training camp. And then obviously from training camp into the regular season, that offensive line has got to be reliable for Justin Fields. We cannot be sitting here in October going, oh man, this is shakier than we thought it was going to be. And these moving parts really have cost them an opportunity to fairly evaluate the quarterback. So you got to get that going quick, fast, in a hurry. And so, I need to see more from Nate Davis. We wanted to talk to him after Wednesday's practice. A few media members requested to speak with Nate Davis, and we asked if he declined, and we're told more or less.
What do you think? What do you make of that? I mean, it's not anything big, but he's not very. Let's just agree, he's not concerned with making a strong first impression or worried about his perception. I think this is a veteran that's just worried about the reality of getting in the trenches and doing his job.
Yeah, I mean, the reason you want to hear from him is just to get an understanding of where his headspace has been. Is there legitimate personal reasons that you've been tending to things away from football for the last several weeks, or did you just, as a veteran, feel like you earned the right to not come and do all the things that everybody else is doing right now? I'd love to just hear it in his words, and hopefully maybe next week during minicamp when we have 3 days of availability, we'll get a chance to reconnect with Nate and figure out where he's at.
Connect.
Well, we talked to him one time right after free agency.
Right after he got signed? Was that via Zoom?
No, that was in person up there.
That was in person. Okay.
So memorable that you lost it completely.
Totally. So. He made such a strong impression that I can't even remember the details. All right. So next week he will be there for minicamp and he'll be in place. I think that offensively the Bears are really, it's odd to say, but the most curious position, the most unsettled position is probably the running back spot, right? I mean, you know who your receivers are going to be. It's going to be DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney. You've got your 2 tight ends, which I think are going to be very good complements and threats, especially in the red zone. We just talked about the offensive line. Justin Fields is on the no excuses tour. He's the headline act. Running back, Khalil Herbert, I know he talked about, boxing and pass protection and all his improvements. Roschon Johnson has done everything except for, been nominated to run for senator. I think that you've got a lot of possibility in the backfield, but I just don't know yet if they know what order that depth chart's going to stack up.
Breaking news, just got this memo from the Chicago Bears. Roschon Johnson is now in charge of the stadium project
exactly.
for Haugh. So he's obviously earned his way up the pecking order very quickly, as we expected on draft weekend that this climb was going to come for him. But yeah, that's a position that you really can't assess at this phase. They're not doing anything where you can judge a running back. I mean, I don't know the last time that you were able to glean a whole lot from individual drills that running backs are doing running through pads, without pads on and just, skipping around and prancing around. There's going to be a lot to learn when we get closer to the regular season, but they've got to sort that out and they've got to figure out the complementary skill sets of these guys and how they want to blend them together. I think Luke is very eager to kind of get this thing to the training camp phase. So then you can start kind of doing the experimental stuff that allows you to form an identity, and you want to have that identity crystallized really quickly. And so it will be in wait and see mode there with the it's not a depth chart right now, as Matt Eberflus told us. It's a reps chart.
Can we start that over? Can we cut that from the podcast? I don't want to make that mistake.
It's a reps chart.
I thought I passed my Bears culture test, but I guess not. I flunked that question. Hey, we digressing slightly regarding the running back position. It is related to the Bears because it's an NFC North issue. Wanted to get your reaction. Dalvin Cook released by the Vikings. Not a huge surprise. Saves them $9 million in salary cap space. He was due to be a $14 million hit. Dalvin Cook, 27 years old. I think only 13 running backs in the last 7 years after their 28th birthday have gotten 1,000 yards. There are a lot of statistics to support the fact that the Vikings may be getting rid of a guy or prefer to a year early rather than a year too late. What do you think about Dalvin Cook leaving the division and how that makes the Vikings more Vulnerable.
My first reaction is there is no crueler position in sports than running back in the NFL. I mean, you can be one of the league's top playmakers, and 18 months later, just be a cast off that no one really wants because you got too much wear and tear on you, and they don't want to pay you, and they can find a younger, cheaper version that can produce more. And so that's reaction one. Reaction two is that we all know that the Vikings are in this kind of awkward transitional phase of being a division championship team that is now trying to figure things out with where they go and who are their core guys. We know who their number one playmaker is. He's the guy that wears 18. You know, Justin Jefferson's going to be their star for a long time and is one of the best players in the entire NFL. But now you've got to make things work. You don't know how much time Kirk Cousins has left as your quarterback. You've got to figure out the entirety of your roster. And so it speaks to me to coupled with obviously the most landmark move of the NFC North offseason, Aaron Rodgers going to New York, the openness of this division and the inability for any of us to have a crystal ball and project it with any certainty at all, because every single team has some massive question marks that, you know, do not have obvious answers to them.
That leads us to our final segment, perhaps, but the prognostication. And when you look at the NFC North, I think with or without Dalvin Cook, I don't know that I project the Bears to win more games than the Vikings. I don't know that I project the Bears to win more games than the Lions. And I don't know that I project the Bears to win more games than they lose. But there are some people out there that do that, Dan. There are some people out there that think the Bears are going to have quite a year.
We have found our way to a new segment that I'm extremely eager to introduce because it's going to have a life for a long time to come here,
Okay.
David. It's a chance for us to take some shots back at some people that aren't really seeing clearly. And you know how much I like to take shots at people that aren't seeing clearly. Adam, go ahead.
We haven't even gotten to your Twitter profile yet, but we don't need to this week. We've got plenty of ammunition.
What you doing, man? What you doing, man?
That is the voice of Zach Pickens, NFL analyst Adam Rank. First of all, let me give you a little background on that. Zach Pickens was being asked some questions by Patrick Finley. Patrick is the king of the follow-up. Sometimes good follow-ups, sometimes off-the-wall follow-ups, and it's kind of noted in the media room that when Patrick has the floor to ask questions, you should be ready for just about anything because it might get a little bit off the wall quicker than you think. And that was a conversation related to Zach Pickens and Gervon Dexter winding up on flights a lot during the pre-draft process as they went to workouts. And Pat, it was almost to the point of asking, like, you wound up on flights together, you know, what gates were they at? And did you stop at Auntie Anne's for a pretzel before you get, and it was going, and then Zach Pickens responded with, Studs, hit it. What you doing, man?
What you doing, man?
So our segment here, David, will be long lasting. What you doing, man? And our first honoree is Adam Rank, NFL Network analyst who went on television last week, admitted Bears homer, and makes no apologies for being such, and went down game by game through the entirety of the NFL schedule. I think you've got the Bears as maybe a 6 or 7 win team. Am I correct?
I think I said 7-10. I believe I said 7-10.
I think I may have them at 7-10, straddling the 6-11 fence. Well, Adam Rank went down the list and he went game by game, and he got deep into October, and the Bears still only had one loss. He had him starting the season at 6-1, and he kept going, and he kept going, and he kept going. And by the end of his win-loss projection for every game, he had the Bears finishing 12-5. Not only did he have the Bears finishing 12-5, but when he predicted a win at Tampa in week 2, he said, this is a place where the Bears have been very good in recent years. Had to go to the Pro Football Reference database to check that out because I've been in Tampa many a times, and I don't remember the Bears leaving there with many, many happy moments since Harold Jones-Forte had 2 interceptions back in a game eons ago. You were there for that one. Harold Jones-Forte. You remember Harold Jones-Forte.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
Well, 2016, they went to Raymond James, and they lost 36-10. The next year, they went to Raymond James, and they lost 29-7. 2021, they went to Raymond James and lost to Tom Brady 38-3 in a game where the Buccaneers didn't play all that well, and then they got back on the plane and Matt Nagy had COVID. So the recent trips to Tampa have not been as promising as Adam Rank thought. The 2023 season will not be as promising as Adam Rank thinks it will be. And so Zach Pickens gets the final word on this one because Adam Rank.
What you doing, man?
Well, okay. So we should have at some point Adam Rank on to defend himself. I'm sure. I'm not sure of anything, but I would imagine that if you are an analyst and you work for the NFL Network,
You'd
and
want to
you
think
care,
through some things.
well, you care about your credibility. Don't you want to have some basis for the facts? So if his basis is that he's honest and transparent about it, this is totally a fan exercise. I'm leading with my heart, not my head. Okay. I think we could have him explain that. But nobody really knows that if they're just seeing on, social media, whatever, that this NFL Network analyst is picking the Bears to win 12 games. It paints a misleading picture that they actually are good enough and have a roster complete enough to win 12 games. They may not have a guy with 12 sacks. They might not have a single or double-digit sack guy. How do you have a team that's going to win 12 games if they can't have a double-digit sack guy? They don't have a pass rusher, for goodness sake. This is a bit ridiculous. What are you doing, man?
They got hot though. They got hot in September and October, and they went 6-1 out of the gates here. Could you imagine? This was sent to me via text, and I literally fell out of my chair watching it when I saw 6 wins out of the first 7 games. Literally fell out of my chair.
I was really okay with it. I know, and I love your overreactions to it because it kind of is fun and amusing. But when I saw the reference to the place that they have done well at in Tampa, I can remember being there, the pirate ship of horrors. That's a terrible venue for the Bears.
Every time they get in the red zone, the cannons are going off, and you're like, the cannons are going off. What are we doing?
That's a great trip. If you cover the Bears in Chicago, that's a great trip. But it never ends well for the Bears. So you remember those trips to Tampa. And there have been way too many that the Bears have not come home victorious, happy, or in one piece. So
by the way, that's also the site of where fullback Paul Lasike landed on Kyle Long's ankle and derails Kyle Long's career for the rest of time. So there's another really promising moment that happened at Raymond James Stadium.
I think of it as the Chris Conte game. There was that game that Chris Conte had a big game against the Bears, his former teammates. I also, Dan, I can remember going there and when John Shoop had left the Bears and it had landed on the Buccaneer staff. I think that was a bad day for them back in the day as well. So a lot of trips to Tampa, not many of them memorable for the Bears. But hey, what's a little information when you're making a prediction?
This segment will get smoother. I promise our audience that as we go along. And this segment will be repeated, I promise you, because every week there's somebody that qualifies for this. And you God better believe that I'm going to find them every week or at least every month.
The hardest thing you're going to do every week is to whittle it down to a list of one of people that piss you off. That's going to be hard to do. Correct. What are you doing, man?
So thank you to Zach Pickens for providing us that, and he will continue to provide us with great amusement as we go forward.
And thank you to everyone out there for listening to this episode of Take the North. You can find it on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. There have been it's been a lot of fun this week. It's been a lot of activity, and we talked about it all. And next week will be even better because the Bears have a 3-day mandatory mini camp. So all of the doting fathers will have to be out there in uniform for the Bears, practicing and being away from their children, making that sacrifice and getting on the field and getting better.
The week of Father's Day, you're making me go out and cover 3 Bears practices?
I'm sorry. You're just going to have to figure out a way. And if you're not there, I understand your excuse because you are at home being a good dad and serving your community. So I look forward to that.
Quick update on that note. Complete game win last night for the youngster on the mound. 11-1 victory over Oriole Park. Went the distance in a 4-inning slaughter rule shutout. Really fun.
Somebody please tell Tommy how
not
to
shutout. 11-1 was not a shutout.
Oh, okay. Well, see, you're a bit of a braggart there now. You're like the dad getting carried away. Talking about the batting average he was hitting 500, but there were like 3 errors involved. That's okay. I think that Ryan Dempster / Wiederer is off to a very good start to the travel league season. Is that where we are?
We're in both right now. We're juggling them both. House playoffs end next week. That was a travel game last night, and away we go. We got about 18 more games left.
Pitch counts, please. Okay, sounded
660 last night. Okay, it was pretty efficient.
Kids in 2 travel leagues. I'm worried about. We don't need to be doing Tommy John surgery on his 14th birthday. Okay,
we've got it monitored. We've got it surrounded, David. Don't worry.
What are you doing, man?
I'm Father of the Year.
Okay, there we go. No, that award's already been given out. Okay, sorry. That one's maybe next year. Jalen Johnson had that one this season. Okay, we are going to get out of here. Next week, we will be back talking about the Bears at the mandatory minicamp. Thank you for listening. For Adam Sadinsky, for Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. We'll talk to you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.